Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Chancellor, and thank you, students, and this, the greatest student body in America. I am so impressed at what the governor of West Virginia had to say. I think that was nice of you a couple weeks ago just to give that little blow-by to give him a little welcome, because next time we meet, they're going to go home and find out what a licking that the flames can give them. But nevertheless, it's great to be with you and to share this time of recognition that we live in a very special place. It was July 4th, 1850, in Washington, D.C. They tried to build a monument to George Washington, and after a few years, they'd run out of money. And so they decided on the 4th of July to have a big rally and encourage people to contribute, and invited the President of the United States to come to speak. And President Zachary Taylor gave his speech, and of course it's hot in July in Washington, and he went back to the White House, and they gave him a bowl of chilled cherries, and he ate the chilled cherries, got stomach cramps, and died. And that was the end of the Taylor administration. Well, whenever anybody famous dies unexpectedly, you know, like Michael Jackson or whoever, they figure, well, there must be some kind of conspiracy here. I mean, he just couldn't just up and die, right? And so they thought, well, maybe somebody had poisoned him or something, and not wishing to act too precipitously, they waited 140 years to dig old Zach up to find out if he'd been poisoned, and they went to Louisville and got him out there and took him over to the University of Louisville. George Will said in his column that President Taylor took his first car ride today. And they took him over to the university to check to see if he had been poisoned, and they discovered that he had not been, by the way. But the point is this. We used to make a big deal out of the fact that people's fingerprints are all different. And then we discovered that more than that, there are no two earlobes alike. And then if we want to really identify a person, we could use the iris of an eye for identification. There are no two irises alike. But more than that, after a few hours, when a heart starts to beat, there are no two hearts that beat alike. The signature of the beating of each heart is unique to that person. But more than that, if you were to take every single cell, you could dissect that single cell and look at the DNA and observe that this cell belonged to Zachary Taylor. Nobody ever before and nobody ever again. God made you and I unique. There'll never be another one like us. The scripture says that when I was in my mother's womb, you shaped my unformed body. God has a plan for your life, a decision that you, this year and from here on out, a responsibility that you can fill that no one else can. And I'm here to say my words of encouragement and support as you find out the plan that He has for your life. In this occasion, we want to celebrate the fact that you have been lovingly handed a tremendous, tremendous gift. You live in a place that is the envy of all mankind. In fact, that in this country, every year there are more books, more plays, more copyrights, more movies, more inventions. This 4% of the world that call themselves Americans do more of that than the other 96% combined. The question would be, why is that? Why is it that this place is such a tremendous blessing to the rest of the world? More wealth. People had hoped to fly for thousands of years. It was Americans that invented the airplane and the light bulb and the telegraph and the telephone and the global positioning system and the internet. Why is it that America does those things? Why has America been so showered with blessings when compared to the rest of the world? Russia, largest nation on earth, larger than number 2 and 3, China and Canada combined. We know that of the strategic metals, Russia is number 1 in 5 of them, number 2 in 1, number 3 in 1. It's a major oil producer, a major gold producer, provides most of the natural gas for Europe, and yet that great nation of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and Rachmaninoff, the great nation of Russia, its combined gross domestic product, its combined GDP, the wealth that's generated by the entire country, is smaller than the state of New Jersey. And then we talk about We see in the Middle East there how that those folks have these large glass buildings and the private jets with the gold faucets and all that sort of thing. We dump trillions of dollars in oil money to them. Combined 26 Arab countries across the Muslim world, take all of the gross domestic product, all of the wealth developed by those 26 countries combined is less than half of the state of California. The fourth largest nation on earth, Indonesia. You know, our president constantly reminds us that that's where he's from. Last week in his talking to the students, he reminded them that that's where he grew up. This third world nation where they throw rocks at American cars when they drive by because of the success of that nation. The fourth largest nation on earth, a major oil producer. The combined gross domestic product of those 300 million people is smaller than the state of Louisiana. 4 million people produce more wealth in the United States in that little tiny state compared to the fourth largest nation. I could go on forever. You might think that I am. The fact is that there is a place, there's a reason for that, and I want to take just a moment to say, why is that? I believe it has to do with the first point that I made, and that is that under our system of government, we recognize that you are unique. God did not give power to government. We believe that God gave power to people, and that we, the people of the United States, formed a constitution that kept the power for us and loaned it to government to serve us. We do not serve it. And that's what makes this country unique. How does it create the wealth? There are people driving down the highway out here. There are two ways to get money out of their pocket, only two. One is called free enterprise. That's where you and I sit up at night and think, what can I do to bless that person, to make them put on the brakes and pull over and hand me money? And so under our free enterprise system, they say, I'll bet if I make coffee really, really good, that they'll smell it and they'll want to stand in line and have me make it. And so a person can develop good coffee. Or if I get a person that will stop and say, I would rather have a clean car than this $5 bill. I would rather have that pair of shoes than this $50. I would rather have that global positioning unit than that $300. Under a free enterprise system, the only way I can receive money is because I must bless someone else. And who determines that? The consumer determines that. And under our free enterprise system, the only way you succeed is by blessing someone else. The greater the blessing, the greater the reward. You provide the quality and the price that makes them happy, you succeed. If you don't, you fail. That's why all of those inventions come from this 4% of the world, because there's only one other way to get money out of that person's pocket. Only one. It's called coercion. Coercion says, give it to me whether you like it or not, and I'm not giving you anything in response. Two people can do that. One is a criminal. It used to be, before Giuliani became mayor of New York, when you came under the tunnel up into Manhattan, immediately people would walk over to your car and they would start washing your windshield, theoretically. They would put some dirt on it and they'd halfway wash it, and then they'd hold their hand out. And if you didn't give them money, then they wouldn't clean off your windshield, and when you drove off, they'd take a key and it would scratch the side of your car. That is coercion. That is called a criminal. And you don't receive a benefit as you would under free enterprise. You are coerced into giving you money. The other source that can do that, the same thing, is called government. Has the capacity to demand money from you. Here's the point. The degree to which you are allowed to use your own income to purchase a blessing for each other is the degree to which people prosper. The degree to which people take money away from you through government and make you live with the remainder is the degree to which people live in poverty. And so, if you have a chart, and I can show you that what percentage of the gross domestic product of any nation is taken from them through taxes and government, here's the principle. The greater the freedom, that is, with the money that you have to purchase as you want, the greater the freedom, the greater the wealth. The greater the government, the greater the poverty. And politics is simply this: whether or not you and I are going to make those free decisions in a free market, or whether politicians are going to take it from us. Of all the economic systems known to man, the most beneficial has been the American private enterprise system. While government economic planning sounds attractive, when you listen to these folks tell the story, they are really sophisticated at explaining why you would be better off if you let them reach their hand into your pocket. While government economic planning may sound attractive, it's fundamental that in order for a government social program to work, we all must be fitted into it. Those that won't fit voluntarily are coerced. That's why they build walls around socialist countries to keep people in to enjoy the benefits. Now we hear talk about a mandatory national health care program, so every man, woman, and child in America can enjoy adequate health care. I ask a very simple question. If a national health care program is so great, why does it have to be mandatory? Because in order for a government social program to work, we all must be fitted into it. Those that won't fit voluntarily are coerced. That's why they build walls around socialist countries to keep people in to enjoy the benefits. You remember last Wednesday night when the President addressed the Congress, and in paragraph number 17, he said all insurance companies will be required to do these various things. Paragraph 24, all insurance companies that want access to this marketplace will have to abide by the protections that I have mentioned. Paragraph 27, under my plan, individuals will be required to carry basic health insurance. Likewise, businesses will be required. Final line, improving our healthcare system only works if everybody does their part. Rather than people willfully and freely choosing, as we do for every other kind of every other kind of insurance, home insurance or car, they want to tell you what to do, what kind of benefits you can have, and how much it will cost. And that is what has made America unique from the rest of the world. And you heard the President in his opening line to say that we are the only country that doesn't do these various things. It's a good thing that I wasn't there. Joe Wilson wouldn't have been the only person in the paper the next day. Because the message that I want to say, thank God, there is one place that we can go. You have 186 nations that you can go to. If we are the only nation that doesn't do something, that's because we're the freest and we're the only place that they can escape to. And that is now entrusted to you. That was last week. Today is September 16th. On September 15th, there was an event, a battle that you'll never forget. And it was precipitated by a desire by Britain to tell Americans what they could do. They would go along the high seas and just take people and say, you're going to fight. We'd just take people off the street. We're going to take you, and you're going to fight for us. And the impressment of American seamen that they weren't free. And this little country said, we're not going to put up with that. And so it was August of 1814 in which the First Lady of the United States, Dolly Madison, was preparing lunch for the last president to command troops in the field, President Madison. He was going to have a leadership conference there in the East Room of the White House, and it was about 11:15 in the morning, and the British warships had sailed up Chesapeake Bay and then up the Potomac, and they knew that they were threatening Washington, but a messenger came running in and explained to Dolly Madison that President Madison was not coming to lunch, but the British were. And with that, she turned and grabbed the painting of her that had recently been done that was in red and is used for the backdrop of the Red Room now in the White House. And there was a silver urn that had been left by John and Abigail Adams and a new painting of George Washington. They tore off the wall and rolled it up and ran out the front door. As the British came in the back door, they ate the lunch, spent the day with the furniture out under the shade trees, and then that night put the torch to the White House, burning it to the ground except for the 4 sandstone walls, burned the city of Washington, including the capital of the United States, got in their ships and began to leave. A handful of folks, they were going up to Baltimore, which was the third largest city and the second largest seaport in the nation. And some of them walked, some of the soldiers, they went through Upper Marlboro, and the Americans came out, just Americans, just people that loved their country, and they were harassing these soldiers. And as they went through Upper Marlboro, as a form of punishment, they grabbed the local doctor, Dr. Beam, said, you're coming with us. And they marched off to Baltimore, and there they were in the ships. In the city of Upper Marlboro, a hand of them got together and went down to get a lawyer to say, we want our doctor back. And they went to a little house where a fellow by the name of Francis Scott Key, an attorney with his 14 children, were living in the home there, and asked him if he would represent them to try to get Dr. Beam back. Well, you're not allowed to negotiate with foreign countries, and so they went to see President Madison and asked for his support. He said, all right, I'll give you Colonel Skinner here, and he'll represent the United States, and you may go negotiate. They went to Baltimore, they rode out to the command ship and said, we'd like to have our doctor back. Well, when they When they got there, they discovered that there were some folks that were not anxious to return them. They harassed them for a day or two, and then finally they said, all right, you can have him, but first thing you're going to do is you're going to stay here because we're going to take over Baltimore tonight. And then they sat on the ship, and they watched as the ships tried to enter the harbor, but they couldn't because just Americans, not soldiers, not Marines, not sailors, just God-loving, freedom-embracing Americans had taken their personal possessions, loaded them on 22 personally owned ship vessels, taking them out to the entrance of the harbor and sunk them in the entrance to the harbor so that the ship couldn't enter. Well, since they couldn't do that, they had rockets that they were going to use, that they were going to attack a little fort that was there by the name of Fort McHenry. And a 31-year-old fella by the name of George Armistead was a major, and he knew that now that he's in control of this little fort, if the British are coming, I'm going to be front and center. And so a year before, he had gone to Mary Pinkerskill there in Baltimore and asked if she would make a flag so large that the British would not have trouble finding it. It makes stars that are 2 feet wide, makes strips that are 2 feet wide. He made a flag that was 42 feet long and 30 feet high and folded it up and waited for the day the enemy came. Well, on September 14th, they came. And they'd developed these new kinds of rockets that had little timers on them, that they thought that perhaps those timers would land and then they would explode after they got there. And the timings weren't real good, and they'd explode while they were halfway there. And then they had these concrete rockets that would make red arches through the air. And so on the night of September 15th, Dr. Bean, Colonel Skinner, and Francis Scott Key were on the command ship watching the city of Baltimore being attacked. The last thing they'd seen when the sun went down was that they saw that great flag flying. Periodically during the night, they could see that it was still there, but about 1 o'clock at night, it went perfectly still, and they thought, no, that means that they've taken the capital, and now our strongest defended fort, perhaps America, has not made it through the night. And so they were very excited as they waited, and to see when the dawn began to break, and Francis Scott Key began to write those words, "Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we had hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous night o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?" But what he didn't know, what he didn't realize was that those same men, not soldiers, sailors, or Marines, just Americans, had gone out and knew that if the ships couldn't come in the Navy, they would have to do a land assault into the swamplands. And they went out there and spent the night in the swamp waiting for the land assault. And when they started the land assault at 1 o'clock in the morning and the guns fell silent and they began to overtake the city, they rose up from the bushes and they turned them back. And indeed, the war was won. And so as Francis Scott Key and Colonel Skinner were able to make it back into Baltimore, he went to the Queen's Hotel and wrote 7 more verses, ending with this one. It says, "Oh, thinking about us this morning," he said, "Oh, thus be it ever that free men shall stand between their loved homes and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may this heaven-rescued land praise the power that has made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must when our cause it is just. Let this be our motto: in God is our trust." And the stars... And the star-spangled banner in triumph will wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. That is what individual Americans have done to make this the beacon for the world, the lighthouse of hope, where people hope to someday escape to, where 85 cents out of every dollar that goes for the cost of global evangelism comes from this 4% of the population of the world. When the communists fell and the churches that had been closed for 74 years were opened up, they turned to America for hymnals and for Bibles. Ladies and gentlemen, America is under attack not because it is evil. America is under attack because it is good. It was September 11th, 1683, in which the Muslim hordes had made it as high as Vienna, Austria, in a siege of that city. And a man by the name of John Sobieski commandeered some friends from Poland and came down and freed Vienna and turned them back, and the high water mark of the Muslim Empire was repulsed, and through the 16, 17, and 1800s, great freedom that we know as Western civilization, of Christian Europe, of Haydn and Shakespeare and Bach and Beethoven, and all the things that took place were a result of the defeat of the Ottoman Turks on September 11th, 1683. Well, there's a fellow that hates freedom. There's a fellow that hates America. There's a fellow that knows that the fight is not at Vienna anymore. The fight is, the scripture says, if you want to take a city, you have to bind the strong man. The strong man is the United States of America. And so on September 11th, 2001, he and his Al-Qaeda hordes decided to commandeer 4 airplanes. 2, they flew into the World Trade Center. 1, they intended to fly into the White House of the United States, but for those of you who have been in the cockpit, you know that you can see out, but you can't see down. And 3 times they passed over the White House, and then on the 3rd pass, they went into the alternative target, which was the Pentagon. But then a 4th one that was flying, in which some folks began to hear that this hijackings that were taking place, which have been taking place for many, many years, unlike hijackings where they go land someplace and you escape, these people are out to destroy and to kill. And so these Americans, just Americans, that understood who they were, that God had made them special, given them the capacity to think and act for themselves, to save and invest and produce and invent. And so they felt that they had to do something. There's a book available in all of the bookstores and all the libraries called the 9/11 Report. I intended to bring it this morning, but I have it back at the hotel. It's about that thick. I'm going to read 5 paragraphs from page 14 and 15, if I may, and with this I close. It was September 11, 2001. During the time, at least 5 of the passengers' phone calls, information was shared about the attacks that had occurred earlier that morning at the World Trade Center. 5 calls described the intent of passengers and surviving crew members to revolt against the hijackers. According to one call, they voted on whether to rush the terrorists in an attempt to retake the plane. Now remember, these aren't people acting on command. During World War II, they said that the Allies had a secret weapon. It was the American GI, a person who understands that they're not just an accident. They're a unique creation of Almighty God. And so they prayed, they decided, and they acted. At 9:57, the passenger assault began. Several passengers had terminated phone calls with loved ones in order to join the revolt. One of the callers ended her message with as follows: "Everyone's running to first class. I must go now. Goodbye." The cockpit voice recorder captured the sounds of the passenger assault, muffled by the intervening cockpit door. Some family members who listened to the recording report that they could hear the voice of a loved one among the din. We cannot identify those voices that can be heard, but the assault was sustained. In response, the hijacker, Jara, the piloting hijacker, immediately began to roll the airplane to the left and to the right, attempting to knock the passengers off balance. At 9:58:57, Jara told another hijacker in the cockpit to block the door. Jara continued to roll the airplanes sharply left and right, but the assault continued. At 9:59:52, Jara changed tactics and pitched the nose of the airplane up and down to disrupt the assault. The recorder captured the sounds of loud thumps, crashes, shouts, and breaking glass and plates. At 10 o'clock, Jara stabilized the airplane. 5 seconds later, he asked, "Is that it? Shall we finish it off?" Another hijacker responded, "No, not yet. When they all come, we will finish it off." The sounds of fighting continued outside the cockpit. Again, Jara pitched the nose of the aircraft up and down. At 10:26, a passenger in the background said, "Into the cockpit. If we don't, we'll all die." 16 seconds later, a passenger yelled, "Let's roll." And we know who that was, a graduate of Wheaton College. And he said, Jara then dropped the, after they said, "Let's roll," Jara stopped the violent maneuvers at 1 minute later and said, "Allah is the greatest, Allah is the greatest." He then asked another hijacker in the cockpit, "Is that it? I mean, shall we put it down?" To which the other replied, "Yes, pull it down, pull it down." The passengers continued their assault. At 10:02:23, hijacker shouted, "Pull it down now." The hijackers remained at the controls, but must have judged that these passengers were only seconds from overcoming them. The airplane headed down. The control wheel was turned hard to the right. The airplane rolled onto its back, and one of the hijackers began shouting, "Allah is the greatest, Allah is the greatest." With the sounds of the passenger counterattack continuing, the aircraft plowed into an empty field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, at 580 miles per hour, about 20 minutes flying time from Washington, D.C. Jara's objective was to crash the airliner into that symbol of the American Republic, the capital of the United States of America. He was defeated by the alerted, unarmed Americans of United Flight 93. Folks, let me tell you, God knows who you are. He has a plan for your life, and when you're alone and you're saying, "I don't know, does this all make sense, and where am I?" You may have been a surprise to someone, but you weren't a surprise to him. He knew you were coming, and he knew you were going to be here today. He has a desire to use you in a way that no one else can be. It may be to bless those around the world by preserving freedom, by sharing the gospel, or at least by doing what you can do this week to make sure that you are registered to vote, because there are those that have gone before, from Baltimore to September 11th, to give to us this, the greatest hope of mankind. And of all the places I could be, and all the people I could be with, there's no place I'd rather be than with you today. God bless.
We have a few minutes left over, and so I thought that I could ask Mr. McEwen a question, and then the Chancellor can ask him a question also. From a student perspective, Mr. And you can come sit on the stool here if you like, and chill. We chill sometimes around it. This is Mr. McEwen. What I was most impressed with this morning when you were with the Helm School of Government students is just like your ability to explain to them why it is important for them to be involved in this country. Now, there are 1,000 international students here, okay? We represent all 50 states in this United States. This is the largest private university in Virginia. Why should everyone be involved on some level, whether it's a United States citizen here, whether it's an international? I mean, why should we really be involved in the process? Is it really that critical, or are these just games for politicians?
Johnny, I wish it were more complicated, but politics is just a matter of people who show up. If you're willing to register and do something, I was telling them this morning that when Liz and I ran into the head of our party in my little hometown of 5,000 one day, and I said, "The city council is having a struggle." I said, "What are we going to do about that?" He said, "Oh, probably nothing." I said, "Are we going to win any of the seats?" He said, "No, I don't think so." And I thought, well, that's a real example of leadership there. And so I got some high school kids. And I asked the high school kids, we invited them to our house and we had pizza, and there were only 4 little wards in our town, and there were 3 at large, and that meant that each ward would elect 4 people, and you could walk an entire ward in one night. And I said, I gave them all these cards with their names on. I said, I want you to walk a ward twice between now and Election Day, and if you will knock on the door and ask the people to vote for this person, everybody who carries their ward will come back after the election, will have steak instead of pizza. And so they did. And out of the 7 seats on the city council, they won All 7. The fact of the matter is that there are 65 million self-identified evangelicals. Those are people that believe that the Bible is the Word of God, have had a personal relationship with Christ, and attend a church service an average of once a week. The definition of an evangelical. 65 million votes will elect everything in America. All 50 governors, all 100 senators, the president and the rest. But of those 65 million self-identified evangelicals, half of them are not registered to vote. And of those that are registered to vote, half of them do not vote. And of the 1/4 that do vote, they're not sure where they stand, and they'll vote in and out, up and down. So as a politician, we know that as a demographic, don't count on them, because they don't. Now let me just tell you this. If that group right there, if that group just starts to twitch, I'm talking 3 to 5 million of them, if just 3 to 5 million of them started to show up, it would change the whole direction of America. The whole direction. It's not that complicated. What do you have to do first? You have to be registered. Number 2, you got to show up. That's why they want $4 billion for Acorn, so they can go out there and grab those people and slap them around and load them in a bus and shove them in the voting booth, because they know that if they can just get them there, that is the course of which the country goes. That leaves it up to you and me. And this group right here, if each one of you would take an interest in 10 people, you know what 100,000 votes would do in this state? Lay them dead. God bless.
First, a little bit of trivia. You mentioned the U.S. Was it the White House or the Capitol that was burned in War of 1812? The fireplaces, the mantles that were in the Capitol. Senator Carter Glass, whose home was on this campus, he was the sponsor of the Federal Reserve Act, and we try to keep that secret, but he also was Secretary of the Treasury under Woodrow Wilson. He had those 2 fireplaces, mantles, put in his home here on the campus, and when we bought it in 1977, the previous owners took those with them. Found out this week that one of the families is returning that fireplace from the Capitol that was burned in 1812 to the Liberty campus. So
wonderful.
Just a little bit of trivia I thought about when you mentioned that. But also during the speech, Johnny handed me a note and said that Air Force One just flew overhead, and Tyler Lee, actually saw it. So I don't know if the president was planning to come to your speech today or not, but he was a little bit late if he was. I think they just landed here in Lynchburg for practice from time to time. But that's the trivia. Now the question. These are our hockey players right here. Most of them are from Canada. You mentioned their first game is this weekend. I hope all of you will be there. I'll be there. But most of the time they're out at my house just doing anything but studying. But they're from, most of them, like I said, most of them are from Canada. And last week, you and I'm not going to say something nice about Canada, so just hold on. Last week, Bob, you and I were talking about the Prime Minister of Canada and where he receives his health care. And I want you to tell us what you learned about that, if you don't mind.
Well, socialism never works, and there's a reason for it. I didn't do it this morning, but especially for you freshmen, I walked through a little bit last year, and when I come back again, I'll spend the whole time just talking about economics and why one side of a country is extremely wealthy, and the other side of a river, a country is extremely poor. And it has to do with the fact that under free enterprise, the only way I succeed is by blessing a person. That means I must make them satisfied with a proper price and a proper quality. And if the quality goes down or the price isn't proper, then I go out of business. But under government, you just have to come to me because I get rid of everybody else. And I have a very, very good friend. His grandfather and his father are both doctors in Canada, and he wanted to be a doctor in Canada. And he went to medical school, and he got his degree, and because government controls it, government told him the only place he could practice medicine was out west, away from his family, away from his brother and sister, away from his cousin, away from the grandparents. And so he lost his freedom because some politician convinced him, we're going to do you a favor, we're going to give you something free. That's called coercion. And as a result, the services in Canada have significantly diminished. They run out of money about November, and you have to wait 6 months often to see a specialist, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're getting cancer or it's growing, you can't get in to get it taken care of. But if you're the Prime Minister, you don't have to wait in line. And so the Prime Minister of Canada, when he needed heart surgery and he wanted to see a doctor immediately, and he wanted to have it done right, he came to the United States of America to get his heart surgery done.